For years now, human rights advocates have warned the medical establishment that denying trans youth essential medical care, specifically gender-affirming care, not only carried with it a high likelihood of psychological harm, but even physical harm and suicide. Well, a recent fundraiser posted by the Good Law Project in conjunction with Transactual would strongly suggest that this has already happened, that no less than 16 trans youth, children, have had their lives taken by anti-trans rhetoric in the UK and the resulting restrictions placed on trans youth healthcare. That's what we're here to talk about. We're here to remember the Tavistock 16. But first, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, medical gatekeeping, child abuse, and suicide. I'd also just like to take the time to remind our viewers that the statements made throughout our videos are the opinions of myself, the host, based on the evidence I have available to me. They are not and should not be taken as unquestionable fact, which is why we reference everything, because we're fallible. Thus we strive to give you, the viewer, the ability to check all evidence for yourself in order to make up your own mind, which is what the reference numbers in the top left corner are for, being numbers that match up with the reference list found in the transcript linked down below. As such, we encourage all viewers to do their own research to reach an informed conclusion about the topic. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them. And today, we're here to talk about how, according to a whistleblower, NHS limits on trans youth healthcare have been tied to no less than 16 suicides, specifically among trans youth. That is to say, said limits made trans youth hopeless and desperate enough that they ended their own lives rather than continue living under a corrupt system or cis supremacy. Today's video is an addition to the previous video discussing the Good Law Project and Transactual launching their legal challenge of the NHS's ban on puberty blockers for trans youth. That video went more into the background regarding the ban and its relation to the CAS review, so if you want to know more about that, do watch said video. I'd also suggest checking out our video exposing the dangers of anti-trans fascism regarding the CAS review and Labour's downfall, specifically the chapter titled Trans Men as Victims, the CAS review, for more details regarding the CAS review and why it's reliant on the denial of peer-reviewed science and the promotion of known pseudoscience. With that said, today's video focuses down on a rather harrowing revelation shared as part of the Good Law Project's legal fundraiser, namely that, quote, "We have heard from a well-placed whistleblower inside the NHS that, in the 7 years before the decision in the Bell case concerning the use of puberty blockers, one person using gender identity development services lost their life. The NHS reacted to that decision by introducing immediate heavy restrictions to NHS services for young trans people, and it did not lift them when the decision was overturned in the Court of Appeal. We have been informed that, in the 3 years following the decision, 16 people lost their lives. We have contemporaneous evidence that this concern was raised at the time, and the whistleblower believes senior management took a decision to suppress evidence of the deaths. We put these allegations to Tavistock, we know it received them, but it has failed to respond. This ban closes off the only route to treatment left open by the restrictions on treatment in the NHS. Atkinson's shockingly callous decision is likely to lead to further deaths of young trans people. We have received many emails from desperately worried parents." End quote. The first thing to note here is the fact that the Good Law Project is being very careful with what it states, as am I, which is why I opened this video by noting that what we have quote unquote would suggest that these deaths are the result of, at least in part, restrictions placed on trans youth healthcare. all further analysis will be given on the assumption that the Good Law Project, Transactual, and the Whistleblower are all acting within good faith, and that the information shared is accurate to the best of their knowledge. Returning to those numbers, going from a single suicide across 7 years of Tavistock operations, which is sad, but it happens, especially in a cis supremacist society, to a whopping 16 suicides over the 3 years following the Bell v Tavistock case that disrupted puberty blockers and gender affirmative care, first legally and then via the refusal to honour the overturning of said ruling, is too much to be a coincidence. And those in control at the NHS would seem to agree, as demonstrated in their actions, namely how they've not only refused to investigate the issue, but, if the whistleblower is correct in what they've reported, have actively sought to hide said children's deaths. If they truly believe that the suicides didn't reflect on the suspension of gender-affirming healthcare, why would they choose to cover up said suicides? Why wouldn't they welcome an external review? Isn't that what the anti-trans bigots have told us throughout this entire ordeal? That they want transparency in order to protect the children? Why is it they only want transparency when it acts as a way for them to prop up anti-Semitic conspiracies, but not when 16 children have actually died, seemingly because of the NHS's decisions surrounding trans youth healthcare? Because it's not like the government and the NHS didn't have an opportunity to discuss this. This information, which NHS officials were made aware of, should have been included in the CAS review. The fact that it was excluded is a clear indictment, not just of the review, but officials involved at every level. Their actions in burying the facts that 16 trans youth took their lives following the ordeal that was Bell v Tavistock has completely destroyed any chance I have for trusting any sort of review at this point. Because, let's be real, who's going to investigate those involved? They're all fucking complicit as far as I'm concerned, and letting criminals investigate themselves is a fool's errand. This is why, in coming up with a name by which to refer to this group, I settled on the Tavistock 16. I want to tether their deaths to the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, which was at the epicenter of all this hate and fear-mongering, so that anytime someone searches Tavistock in relation to trans youth, this is what comes up. I don't want to let the NHS bury this, as they're apparently trying to do. There needed to be some sort of genuine inquiry into these deaths and the extent to which Tavistock, the NHS, and the current government, which Conservative Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch recently boasted was deliberately and artificially stacked with anti-trans bigots, are responsible. 16 children are dead, with all fingers currently pointing at politicians and the hack doctors who empowered hatred and bigotry. And if those accusations stand to scrutiny, then heads need to roll. This isn't something that can just be ignored, buried and forgotten. Not only would that be akin to pissing on the graves of the very children whose lives were stolen from them, it is, as noted by the Good Law Project, setting things up to repeat for more children to be killed by government action, which, considering the targeted nature of said violence, would constitute nothing short of state-sanctioned extermination. These politicians and their faux physicians may not have tied the noose or forced the pills down these children's throats, but they're the ones who created the unlivable conditions, a literal hell on earth, that drove these children to the point that death became the only way they could escape. And I will be fucking damned if I don't call it out for what it is. And so will everyone else. They're murdering our siblings, literal goddamn children, whilst gleefully gloating about it, standing on a pile of their corpses. Yeah, what can we do? What can we do? Well, for a start, we can remember the dead. I have been going from server to server, community to community, platform to platform, asking about whether anyone knows of any plans to hold a vigil, either in London near the Tavistock clinic that enabled this, or anywhere, perhaps at one of the many remaining prides. So far, not a single person has gotten back to me with anything solid. I'd organised something myself, but I'm not living in the UK, meaning I can't set something up on the ground. This video is my final attempt to try and get someone to take notice, to organise something, anything. I get that it's hard for some to sympathise with the dead, especially considering the fact that we don't know their names or faces. But I would argue that that is all the more reason to remember them. In the same way that we'd mourn the unidentifiable discovered in a natural disaster or mass grave brought about by human atrocity, we need to remember the Tavistock 16, to hold their spirits in our hearts and to never let go of the pain, the sorrow, and the fury that their state-sanctioned murders compel us to feel. The Tavistock 16 shouldn't be dead. They should be alive and thriving. They should be going off to college, making friends, and figuring out their place in the world. But those dreams were stolen from them, smashed against the rocks by a government that seeks nothing more than to make trans existence so bleak, so violent, that death seems like an escape. They tortured those children into taking their lives and then gloated about constructing the situation that allowed for said torture. So please, if you have a platform or the ear of a local organiser, use it. Don't let the NHS bury this. Don't let the ones like Victoria Atkins and Kemi Badenoch get away with their support for such atrocities. Don't let history repeat itself. Anytime someone attacks trans youth healthcare, demand then and there that they explain why they support the murder of trans youth like the Tavistock 16. Make them face the ghost of their actions, their choices, their violence. For as long as trans people are denied peace, especially trans children, so should anti-trans bigots, so should gender-critical fascists, so should the government that murdered 16 children. Because I don't know what else to do. It feels like we are quickly exhausting all peaceful options and my heart breaks. I genuinely don't know how much more of this I can take. But we don't have the option of abandoning the conversation. For the trans community, this is do or die, so I say do. Leave them no ambiguity to hide behind, no doubt as to their true intent. Make sure that everyone with a moral conscience knows that support for restricting gender-affirmative healthcare on any level is a declaration that a person knowingly, willingly, and personally supports the murder of the Tavistock 16 and seeks to make themselves an accessory to any and all future murders of trans youth. Don't let these ghouls slither back to their rocks, expose them for what they are, everything that they are, people complicit in the murder of children. Then, and only then, can we even begin to talk about justice, about what the people responsible deserve as their punishment.